Tonight, tragedy in Georgia.
Our hearts are with those families in Winder, Georgia, who are forced to face this act of senseless violence.
A community grieves as authorities investigate a deadly school shooting. Plus, the latest on efforts to free Israeli hostages and secure a ceasefire. And secrets and espionage.
She allegedly used her government rules to quietly push China's agenda.
A former aide to 2 New York governors charged with spying for Beijing. The alleged Chinese plot to undermine America. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A Georgia community is in shock tonight after a gunman massacred students at a local high school. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Faith Nation. From CBN's headquarters in Virginia Beach, I'm Wendy Griffith. Well, a new school year, another school shooting, this time in a southern town in Georgia. CBN's John Jessup has been monitoring the developments throughout the day. John, this is so heartbreaking. What do we know now?
Heartbreaking indeed. Well, Wendy, students, teachers, faculty, and coaches thought that they would be hosting a volleyball game tonight. Instead of celebrating a potential win, they're mourning and trying to make sense of the latest school shooting, at least 4 dead and several more injured. What we know is that around 9 o'clock this morning local time, the school went on lockdown in response to an active shooter on school grounds. Emergency responders and local, state, and federal law enforcement arrived at the chaotic scene, further compounding the chaos of an active shooter situation. Panicked parents immediately rushing to the school once they got word, causing miles and miles of a backlog as families tried to reunite. Aerial footage shows the extent of the scramble as students evacuated to the football field, which then doubled as a meeting point. Police have arrested a school-age suspect, but are releasing few other details, asking for patience as they are now just hours into the investigation.
First and foremost, I want to lift up our community. I want to give our sympathies to our community, our school system, our kids, our parents that had to witness this today. Obviously, what you see behind us is an evil thing.
And Wendy, few would disagree with that characterization of evil.
Pure evil. Well, John, what else can you tell us, if anything, about the suspect and the investigation?
Well, according to reports with students, and the school population is around 2,000 or just under 2,000, the shooter is one of their classmates. And if that's true, if 18, at least 18, that means the suspect could legally possess the gun, but someone else 21 years or older would have had to buy it. As for the investigation, the Barrow County Sheriff's Office is taking the lead with the assistance of state and federal authorities, including the FBI. I should also note that both nominees have weighed in with their condolences, and President Biden has called on Congress to enact common sense gun safety laws.
And John, do we know any more about how the students and parents are dealing with this?
Yeah, a really important question, Wendy. As the events were unfolding, we had reports trickling in of students barricading themselves behind classroom doors, parents forming prayer circles, students running, taking cover. I visited the Facebook page of the Appalachia High School there in Winder, Georgia, and you could see in real time people responding with prayers, with comments of support. One parent talked about how her son had called and said that they're moving them to the stadium. Wendy, just real-time, raw emotions unfolding as the events were taking place.
And I just kept thinking, wow, the school year has just begun, and already we've seen this. Great reporting. Thank you so much. That's John Jessup in Washington, D.C. for us. Well, in other news, the U.S. is escalating its actions against Hamas, not only pushing for a ceasefire, but also taking legal steps against the group. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu standing strong, refusing to concede on one crucial term that has ignited significant controversy within Israel. CBN's Tara Mergener is here now with the latest. Tara.
Wendy, the Department of Justice is charging the head of Hamas in the deadly attacks and the kidnapping of American citizens on October 7th. Now, this marks a shift from solely negotiating a ceasefire to seeking justice.
Hostage deal now! Hostage deal now!
In Tel Aviv, protesters demand Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sign a ceasefire deal they hope will get the remaining hostages home.
We want them alive!
On October 7th, Hamas terrorists murdered nearly 1,200 people, including over 40 Americans, and kidnapped hundreds of civilians. They perpetrated the deadliest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
Public anger is intensifying since Israeli forces recovered the bodies of 6 hostages, including an American Israeli from tunnels in southern Gaza last week.
They riddled them with bullets, then they shot each of them in the head, some of them several times. And these are the savages, these are the terrorists that Iran implanted next to our border, as elsewhere. And we're committed to defeating them, to extirpating this evil from our midst.
But a key stumbling block in the negotiations is Netanyahu's refusal to fully withdraw the troops from Gaza's border with Egypt. The proposed deal includes a 6-week truce that would require Israel to pull out of the Philadelphia corridor in exchange for the release of 20 hostages. Netanyahu has rejected this condition, arguing that the presence of the IDF is crucial to prevent Hamas from smuggling weapons and rearming.
Gaza cannot have a future if Gaza remains porous and you can enable rearmament of terrorists through the Philadelphia corridor.
The dispute over the corridor has sparked further division within Israel.
The Philadelphia corridor is an operational challenge, but is not an existential threat to the state of Israel. Iran's axis of evil is the existential threat to us.
U.S. officials say President Biden is personally involved in the negotiations.
And today, the White House reiterated that President Biden is 100% committed to getting this ceasefire deal done and that efforts are being made night and day, Wendy.
Tara Mergener, we appreciate that reporting. Thank you so much. While American leaders combat threats to our democracy, they're also working on a new nuclear strategy. The plan, reportedly signed off on by President Biden earlier this year, is said to provide new guidance to account for global threats and China's rapid nuclear expansion. The details remain top secret, but as national security correspondent Caitlin Burke reports, experts believe a policy change is necessary if the U.S. is going to deter its nuclear-armed adversaries.
As long as nuclear weapons have existed, the United States' priority is preventing any such attack against the homeland, our allies, and partners. Maintaining that role in today's world has led to calls for an updated plan.
As China develops a full-fledged nuclear triad and Russia threatens to deploy nuclear weapons in Ukraine, not to mention continued advancements in the North Korean nuclear arsenal and the threat of Iranian nuclear proliferation, the U.S. strategic deterrent remains critical.
In recent speeches, senior Biden administration officials have been given clearance to allude to changes.
The president recently issued updated nuclear weapons employment guidance to account for multiple nuclear-armed adversaries.
Last month, Dr. Vipin Narang, an MIT nuclear strategist and former defense official, said his office was advising the Pentagon on how to plan and posture U.S. forces in the current nuclear landscape. While Narang isn't calling to grow the U.S. stockpile yet, he says adjustments to weapons currently deployed may be necessary if adversaries continue down current paths.
The Pentagon estimates that Beijing had 500 operational nuclear warheads as of May 2023. Okay, 500. Well, compared to what? Well, they're going to have over 1,000 of those by 2030. That is what some military leaders have called a breathtaking breakout. What makes it even more reckless, I'd say, and even irresponsible on Beijing's part, is they're doing it with tremendous secrecy, and they're stubbornly refusing to negotiate with us a strategic arms reduction treaty. The Trump administration has tried. The Biden administration has tried. So we have the whole thing going on with Putin where he's doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then we have Beijing, who's unwilling even to talk with us in good faith about some sort of treaty.
Bradley Bowman, senior director of the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, says whoever becomes president needs to focus on two things when it comes to U.S. nuclear posture.
I would say continue to fully modernize the modernization of all three legs of our nuclear triad. I would look for opportunities to expedite those as much as possible. And simultaneously, I'd be reaching out diplomatically to Russia and China and saying, we are ready to do real negotiations, real, not fake, negotiations that elicit commitments on both sides that are transparent.
China has expressed concern over reports of a new U.S. nuclear plan, accusing the Biden administration of seeking a strategic advantage by peddling a, quote, China nuclear threat narrative. The White House says the new plan is not in response to any one country or threat. In a recent visit to Beijing, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan specifically assured President Xi that Vice President Harris, if elected in November, would continue to responsibly manage the relationship with China.
She shares President Biden's view that responsibly managing this competition so it doesn't veer into conflict or confrontation is essential.
An unclassified account of the new nuclear guidance is expected to be given to Congress before President Biden leaves office. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Caitlin. Coming up, the alleged Chinese scheme to infiltrate New York politics when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. A former top aide who worked for 2 New York governors is facing charges of secretly helping the communist government and receiving millions of dollars in cash and perks in return. George Thomas has details.
Linda's son walked out of a Brooklyn federal court charged with acting as an undercover agent for Beijing. The feds say the 41-year-old Chinese-born U.S. citizen used her position as former aide to New York governors Kathy Hochul and Andrew Cuomo to directly help the Chinese government.
She allegedly used her government rules to quietly push China's agenda.
The 65-page indictment has Sun facing 10 criminal counts, including money laundering, visa fraud, trying to block New York state officials from meeting with Taiwanese government representatives, and changing some of the state's policy messaging to benefit the communist government's priorities.
These actions reportedly gave China influence in New York's government for nearly a decade.
Governor Hochul expressed outrage at the betrayal and said Sun was fired the moment misconduct was discovered. In exchange for acting as a foreign agent, Sun and her husband, Chris Hu, charged as a co-conspirator, received millions of dollars in Chinese kickbacks, allowing the couple to splurge on multi-million-dollar homes in Hawaii and Long Island, buy a 2024 Ferrari, enjoy travel benefits, tickets to events, and on 16 different occasions, reportedly got Nanjing-style salted ducks specially prepared by the personal chef of a Chinese government official. Breon Peace, U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, said Sun wielded her position of influence among executives to covertly promote PRC and CCP agendas, directly threatening our country's national security. Prosecutors say Sun actively concealed that she took actions at the order, request, or direction of CCP officials.
This case is part of a broader effort by the Justice Department to uncover secret Chinese agents in the U.S.
The couple pleaded not guilty to all 10 charges in federal court Tuesday afternoon. George Thomas, CBN News.
Thanks, George. Turning now to the war in Ukraine. At least 7 people are dead tonight following Russian strikes in the western city of Lviv. Aerial footage shows damaged buildings and cars on fire. Rescuers seen here searching for survivors in the wreckage. The latest barrage comes as President Zelensky plans a major shakeup of his cabinet. Several Ukrainian leaders, including the foreign minister, have submitted their resignations. The overhaul is reportedly intended to improve Ukraine's ties with the West and increase weapons production. Well, joining us now is John Hardy. He's the Russia Program Deputy Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. John, welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
What's behind Russia's increased attacks on Ukraine? Is this retaliation for Ukraine's surprise incursion of Russia territory?
Well, I don't know if they're increased. I mean, Russia routinely conducts strikes against critical infrastructure like electricity production, as well as various military or military industrial facilities throughout Ukraine. Sometimes those strikes, whether intentionally or otherwise, will hit civilian targets, as seems to have happened in Lviv, where at least some of the casualties were civilians. Yesterday, there was a strike in Poltava, another city in central Ukraine. Really, Russia, I think, is they continue to strike Ukrainian electricity infrastructure with the goal of really putting the squeeze on Ukraine come the winter, and then B, with the strikes on military targets. I mean, these continue really all the time, and they're really targets of opportunity for Russia.
John, President Zelensky planning to overhaul his government. Why is this shakeup happening now, and what does it signal?
Well, I think it's been months in the works. As you mentioned earlier, maybe half a dozen or so different ministers. Some are leaving government, some are having their portfolios changed or expanded. I think there are probably different motivations for each one of the moves, but Zelensky often likes to kind of do these things as part of a package deal. And I think, A, he might just like change, or B, in some cases, he might feel that a certain minister isn't getting the job done, or it would be better in another role. So,
John, let me step in here real quick. I need to ask you about the November election. Could this affect America's support for Ukraine, who ends up in the White House?
The composition of the Ukrainian government will not make a difference. I think Zelensky does want to have the right team in place in this crucial moment, which is important developments both in Ukraine and in terms of Western support.
Also, speaking of elections, today Attorney General Merrick Garland accused Russia of weaponizing disinformation to influence the presidential election. We've heard claims like this before. What is your reaction?
Well, the Russians have been doing this for a very, very long time, even before Russia's 2014 invasion of Ukraine. And so they've obviously interfered in the 2016 election. They've taken similar efforts in elections since then. And so the latest allegations from the Biden administration are really part and parcel of Russia's playbook, moving money covertly to front organizations, spreading disinformation to try to undermine U.S. support for Ukraine and sow division and undermine faith in democracy here in the U.S.
All right. John Hardy, Deputy Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. We always appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, a shocking robbery ignites a display of love and forgiveness in a Virginia community. The story is amazing. You've got to see it. Welcome back. A neighborhood lemonade stand sparked a show of community support and forgiveness after a robbery left 2 children shaken. The Caldwell family used the incident to share a powerful message about faith and forgiveness. CBN's Brody Carter reports.
During the dog days of summer, 10-year-old Rebecca Caldwell and her 8-year-old brother Joshua were selling lemonade in front of their home in Chesapeake, Virginia, when a stranger seemingly stopped to buy a drink.
Seemed super nice.
That turned out not to be the case when the man took their $40 in earnings and sped off.
Yeah, I was really upset, and my husband was on the phone with me when it happened.
Home security footage shows the man approaching the stand and grabbing the money jar while their mother was inside. The robbery could have left the family disheartened, but instead they chose to focus on prayer and forgiveness.
Why did you pray for the man who stole your money?
Because I wanted him to become a Christian.
Rebecca and Joshua, along with their parents, quickly forgave the man who stole from them.
I just think it's better to forgive and just to always be mad at the guy, because then you're just like,
always going to think back on that day and be like, oh, I'm so mad at that guy.
When life handed these two young entrepreneurs a sour situation, the community really stepped up to help and gave them something that was much sweeter.
This has been incredible, mind-blowing. I mean, it's just so overwhelming.
A week after the robbery, the community came together and helped the Caldwell family raise more than $6,200 in donations at a special lemonade event.
All the people were really nice, and I got to ride on one of their motorcycles.
Immediately, there was so much support coming out of it that it's like, you know, we're blessed by this whole thing. I mean, yeah, something bad happened for a moment, but ever since that moment, it's just been blessing after blessing.
As news stations spread their story across the country, the Caldwells are using their time in the spotlight to share the gospel.
We've talked a lot about forgiveness in our interviews. Some people have asked why we choose to forgive.
Taping this heartfelt message to the lemonade stand, the Caldwells pointed those who stopped by toward the cross, turning their experience into a powerful testimony.
If God can do all this through a lemonade stand, he can do it through anything. He can do the impossible. We just want people to know that God forgave us, and so we can forgive other people.
Rebecca and Joshua, the youngest of 7 siblings, plan to use some of the funds raised for their oldest sister's missionary trip to Asia, with the rest going towards some new toys, like a 4-wheeler and a dirt bike. The Caldwell story is a powerful reminder that when life hands you lemons, you can turn them into lemonade, and with faith and love, you might just find yourself getting something far sweeter. Brody Carter, CBN News.
I literally cried when I saw that story the first time. Well, the suspect is facing a felony charge of grand larceny. Robbery doesn't pay. Coming up, fostering recovery one pet at a time. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a foster program is helping people keep their pets while recovering from addiction. It's called Positive Recovery. Get it? Positive. The Denver-based organization takes in animals for people receiving treatment for drugs, alcohol, or mental health recovery. The program manager says that for many people, pets play a big role in the healing process. Positive Recovery has helped more than 180 people and lets the pets stay with their owners during recovery, which is the key. Well, that is going to do it for Faith Nation. We're so glad you joined us. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.